What a way to start week one. We've got games yesterday to get to, games today to preview. It's going to be a busy end of the week.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You're tuned in to Locked On Big Ten, everything you need to know about the conference every day of the week. I'm your host, Nate Dickinson. Our show today is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is where the game starts. If you're a sports gambler, all the information, all the games, odds, lines that you could ever ask for, they're over at BetOnline. Again, where the game starts and helping us get you the podcast today. Coming up on today's show, we've got a lot to preview coming up today, and of course, a big game last night to go over between Penn State and Purdue. Matt Sheehan's going to come on to review what we saw on Thursday, while also taking a look at Michigan State's matchup against Western Michigan here this evening for a little bit. And then also Jacob Rude has a preview of Indiana and Illinois with us, the Big Ten matchup of the day, at least. Of course, we had one yesterday too. That's all coming up here today on our show. We are going to also, because these are some longer interviews, I don't want to go too long here, and I know we have a lot on Saturday stuff to get to as well. I'm going to be posting on Saturday a recap of tonight's games, as well as a preview of the games going on Saturday morning to a little bit more in-depth. We've talked about them throughout the week here this week, and we've gotten to every big game with somebody, or at least in depth as much as we can here. So I'm going to have, again, a deeper look at each of the smaller games in the non-conference schedule coming out, as well as a recap of the two games here tonight. That's coming out here tomorrow on the podcast feed, YouTube, whatever it may be, before those games get started up. So tune in then, and of course, be sure, as always, to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date whenever we end up dropping something new. All right, let's get into everything that's going on here this weekend. First, though, I mentioned on yesterday's show we'd get a recap of Minnesota and New Mexico State, too. We're going to talk about Penn State and Purdue with Matt, but the Golden Gophers blew out New Mexico State and the Aggies yesterday at what was TCF Bank Stadium. I was going to say now Huntington Bank Stadium in Minneapolis. Mo Ibrahim was incredible exactly 1 year after tearing his ACL in the opener against Ohio State. In this one, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns on 21 carries. PJ Fleck not exactly easing him back into it, but they know he can handle the workload there. Tanner Morgan, 174 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Perfect little game manager situation for him. 3 different quarterbacks threw a pass for the Gophers. It was not close, with a 38-0 win for the Golden Gophers, and that matchup means that I missed out on my pick of New Mexico State being able to get within 36, and I also lost out, of course, in the Penn State-Purdue matchup. Had Purdue plus 3.5, they lose by 4. Heartbreaker. That will be another discussion we have with Matt Sheehan. All of the picks for today and tomorrow's games coming up with him. But Jacob Rude will actually get his picks for Penn State and Purdue as well, as we talked to him before that game happened. So we'll get him on the record to start keeping track of things too. But right now for the season, I'm 1-4 now, which isn't good, but hey, I'm not here to win. Fade me if you want to. I'm telling you what I think here on Locked On Big Ten. We'll have more with Matt here in just a moment. Get some looks at the Big Ten matchup of the day with Jacob later on. That's all coming up right here on the show. But first, do you think it's okay to drive stoned? Well, the truth is your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you too. So stop kidding yourself. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high and get a DUI. Back in here on Locked On Big Ten, as we start to preview week one around the conference. One of the conference matchups of the week takes place here on Friday, Indiana against Illinois. A couple of teams who aren't necessarily projected to be at the top of the Big Ten standings this season. but a couple of teams who have a chance to start off the season with a Big Ten win because of that, since they're playing each other here in week one. Jacob, first off, before we get to Indiana, Illinois already played. Looked pretty good against Wyoming. What did you think about the effort that they showed out with that big win?
Well, yeah, I mean, Chase Brown looked really good. That was one of the biggest things, not necessarily a surprise. I think everybody expects him to be one of the top running backs in the conference this year, but 151 yards, 19 carries was impressive from him. I think the other thing was defensively, particularly when it came to Wyoming, his passing game, it was non-existent. 5 of 20 for 30 yards and an interception. Illinois secondary is really good, which is going to be an interesting challenge for an IU team that has so many uncertainties on the offensive end.
Let's talk more about how that leads into this matchup. What do you think IU is going to be able to do with a guy like Chase Brown?
It's going to be interesting. There are certainly a lot fewer questions on the defensive side of the ball when it comes to Indiana. Tom Allen went back to taking over play calling duties defensively, so he has a little bit more, I guess, responsibility or say on the defensive side of the ball, and that's where he's made his name. So some room for optimism there. Defensive line was an area that had a fair amount of turnover. Some new faces are stepping in there, and then you obviously lose Micah McFadden to the draft. So some pretty big hole to fill in the linebacking core as well. So that front seven has some questions, and having to match up against somebody like Chase Brown right away is going to be a tough challenge. If that front seven can kind of hold the fort down and allow the secondary to not have to kind of move into the box to help slow the rundown, I think Indiana would be in a really good position. But there's a lot of new faces across the board, maybe not as much defensively, but a lot of new faces across that defensive line, at least, that are going to be kind of thrown into the fire this week with this matchup against an Illinois team that's going to run the ball a lot.
Jacob, you haven't been shy about how you're not really optimistic about where the ceiling's at for this IU team. Do you think they should be favored as they are against Illinois here this week?
It's been really weird following the line for this game, because it opened up at around 3 or 4 during the summer. Yep. It got all the way up to 6 about midway through August. IU was favored by 6 points, which I thought felt crazy. I think this will be an even matchup, and it's come down to, I think, IU by 1.5 now, but it's been all over the place. Being at home probably slightly favor Indiana. I think this is legitimately just kind of a toss-up game. You could make the argument maybe a little bit of advantage to Illinois for having a week 0 game, but then you're still going on the road under the lights. Memorial Stadium is going to be really full. 40,000 people is what they're expecting, which for an IU football game is a lot. So a pretty good crowd turnout. It's going to be a pretty fun environment. So I think this game's legitimately a toss-up. On my podcast, I took IU minus 1.5. I feel decent about them in this game, but it's going to be a tight one.
So what are you trying to learn here in week 1 about Indiana? Because there's a lot of questions to be answered with this roster right now. What do you think are the biggest ones?
What the offense looks like. I know that's kind of a really big question, but there's not a lot we know about this Indiana offense. The offensive line, they return almost everybody. And then outside of that, it was almost entirely turned over, from wide receivers to tight ends to running backs to quarterbacks. We still don't know who the starting quarterback is going to be. And assuming it's not leaked in the final hours leading up to the game, we're not going to know until he lines up under center for the first play from scrimmage. So starting there to the running back situation to the the IU offensive coordinator, Walt Bell, said that they're planning on playing 9 wide receivers this season. So there's no sort of certainty at all there. I guess the answer to that question is just figuring out what the offense looks like. Who's going to be the contributors? Who's going to step up? There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of shoes to fill. There's there's so much uncertainty and so many questions about this offense. I earnestly don't know what to expect. I mean, in the past, Walt Bell's been more of a run first offense. I don't know if that's what he's going to do. We have Sean Shivers transfer from Auburn back there. The second in the depth chart in the running backs will be a true freshman, most likely. So there's just so many new faces, so much chemistry that'll need to be built. So the biggest thing I'll be looking at is just what this offense can do, having not a ton of time together, relatively speaking, trying to figure some things out on the fly. And I wish it were coming against Idaho or Western Kentucky and not Illinois, but can't really control that. It'll make for a more interesting game, but there's a lot we're going to learn about the offense for IU on Friday.
A lot of questions, but again, a chance for both of these teams to get a win in the Big Ten Conference to start off the season. And both of them feel, of course, like they've got a good shot at it, despite all those question marks. That's what makes this game all that intriguing. And it's also what makes the line pretty intriguing. You mentioned from BetOnline, Jacob, we're going to try, and when we have people on here from our local experts around the Locked On Network, get as many picks as we can from people throughout the season, keep track, see who can do it best among the people that we get here on the show consistently. So let's get our start with you with the Indiana-Illinois game first. Of course, IU -1.5 right now. It started the week at 3, has moved to 1.5 throughout the week, Jacob. I'll get my picks in at another point in the show when we talk to Matt. What do you have in that game?
It's close enough that I feel like I have to pick IU -1.5. It's going to be a fun game, but I'll side with the Hoosiers. I think they come away with the win, and the score I predicted was 23-20 in this one.
All right, let's keep going. We'll do it real quickly here as we just go through the rest of the lines. Starting off with a matchup between, and I don't know if I have them all actually here, but we'll start with Penn State Purdue. We're talking Penn State Purdue, or talking before that game happens here, so we can actually get that pick. You will know what happens when you're listening, but it's 3.5 in favor of the Nittany Lions in West Lafayette.
As an IU grad, I think I'm legally obligated to pick Penn State in this one.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I'll pull it up over on my computer now, actually, if the lines aren't going to show up on my pad here. But as we continue along now down the line into the rest of them, New Mexico State's 36-point underdogs against Minnesota. I don't know if we want to get into that one. We'll start off with the closer games first. Of course, the biggest game of the weekend is Ohio State -17 against Notre Dame.
I think Ohio State's really good. I'll take Ohio State in that one, even with that big line.
Michigan State -21 against Western Michigan.
That one's a little more interesting. I'll still take Michigan State in that one, though.
And I'll leave the big ones as optional for you, I guess. Michigan's -30.5 against Colorado State. And then Minnesota, again, -36 in a game that will have already happened by the time people are listening to this, against New Mexico State.
Yeah, the Minnesota-New Mexico State game is actually kind of fun because there's some back and forth smack talk. I'll say Minnesota might run up the score on this one. I might take Minnesota -36 on that one.
All right, well, for the games that already happened, I had Purdue and I had the New Mexico State side. So we'll see who ends up being on the right end of it. Jacob, thank you for joining us to help us preview this Indiana-Illinois matchup too, which is, as we just went over, the best one as far as actual point spread and what people think is going to be a close game in the entire conference this weekend. So it'll be interesting to see who looks better between those two teams on Friday. And of course, interesting to hear what you think about whatever comes out of Indiana this weekend too, next time we talk. Thanks as always for joining us, Jacob. We'll talk to you soon.
Looking forward to it.
Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Hoosiers. Jacob's there every weekday, just like we are here. Nate Dickinson here, Matt Sheehan's with us. We're talking just moments after a big Thursday night Big Ten matchup to start off the season and start week one off with a bang, Matt. Penn State 35-31, the final score after a late, long drive by Sean Clifford and the Penn State Nittany Lions gets them that win in Indiana. And the Nittany Lions just get a win that I said beforehand on the show today. Both these teams had similar, I think, trajectories going into this season. But I thought whoever came out of this game with the win was going to have a huge boost to start it off with more than what it just meant, of course, for the Big Ten standings. Penn State, I think, showed that it's the more ready team to at least be good. I had that in my notes. Penn State, at a whole lot of different times tonight, looked like the team that is more ready to be top 25, whatever that is.
No, 100%. And look, you never apologize for road wins in your own conference, especially when that's week one at an environment like Ross-Ade, where, hey, how many times have we seen ranked teams go in there and walk out with all their limbs severed off? I mean, yeah, Penn State took that game from the jaws of victory from Purdue as well. Purdue was in very good standing to win that game, but look, Penn State had a great performance out of Sean Clifford. That's what we miss from college football, right? These great individual performances. We miss the outright, utter confusion. Like Purdue's clock management at the end right there, and just the atmosphere was great. The game was great back and forth. Hey, look, week 0 was fun, cute little warm up to the season, but no. Week 1 is where it really gets serious, and what a great way to kick off this weekend right here. So, hey, look, both teams have good things to take away. We might get into a little later, but yeah, if you're Penn State, you are jazzed to be leaving Ross-Ade Stadium at night with a victory. Never apologize for that.
What do you think of how Purdue handled things at the end there?
Well, when you have the lead in the fourth quarter and your next 15 plays are 14 pass plays and 1 called run, I question that a little bit, Nate, don't you? It's impossible to not. Look, I know we're doing a lot of hindsight talk right here, but even in the moment, it was like 2nd and 6. We have less than 3 minutes. Penn State has 2 timeouts that you'd probably like them to burn. Yeah, let's just sling the ball 14 yards off our back foot. Why not? That was crazy. That was nuts. But whatever, I guess you put the ball in the best player's hands. Aiden O'Connell on that team. I get Purdue doesn't really have an established run game, but just need the ball. You got to find a way to chew some time off the clock, or at least get the timeouts out of Penn State's pockets. But whatever. Again, that's Monday morning quarterbacking right there is what they call it. Wow, it's fascinating.
Questionable choices there at the end.
Yeah.
And then you had not really choices, but at the end of the first half, Purdue absolutely just blew it too. The fumble, and then not only taking away those points, but of course you just have the 2-yard or 2-play 80-yard, whatever it was, drive with however many seconds it was. It ends up being 2. It was just absolutely brutal. And I tweeted something like it at halftime, but I don't know who had the bigger blowout disappointment loss at the end, whether it was Purdue or Nebraska over the last week or so.
Oh, wow. I want to say Nebraska just because of everything last year too. 9 losses, all single digit. And this year is just more of the same. Like that wasn't the first game of the 2022 season for Nebraska. That might as well have just been like the 10th loss from the 2021 season, because it was the same fashion, just different players wearing different jerseys. But that might be more hard to digest if you're a Nebraska fan. But yeah, that's not to say that Purdue fans are just driving back home hey, we tried our best. That was a good game. We don't feel too bad for the loss. No, that was a punch right in the groin area if you're a Purdue fan. Man, it's 2 tough losses for the fan bases there. But look, Purdue's got something fun in Charlie Jones. Aiden O'Connell's still good. I like their tight end. There's some good things to look at. And you're in the Big Ten West, where look, the team that's going to go to Indianapolis is probably going to have 3 Big Ten losses. I mean, you're still squarely in play for Indianapolis. Yes, it's going to be a dogfight with Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, all those teams, but their schedule fills out nice for them. Their crossover games are still Indiana, who I think stinks out loud, and then they got to go to Maryland. But look, they got their toughest crossover game out of the way. Now, can you just keep your head over water or blood, really, in the Big Ten West to see if you could just kind of tread water and just maybe net out with 3 losses, because that might be good enough to get to Indy. That might be good enough to get to Indy in the Big Ten West. So we'll see.
Some of the things I wanted to learn and just some takeaways, I think both quarterbacks I thought were fine, at least at first. And at the very beginning, they were both playing really well. And just, I think also just weren't being asked to do a ton at first on either side. O'Connell finishes with 365 yards, Clifford 282 and 4 touchdowns. It was plenty of scoring for a Big Ten kickoff kind of game. And I think on both sides, you have enough positives to take away here to be able to say, okay, we can be a good football team. But obviously Penn State has the W. It has a whole lot of momentum going its way. And for Purdue, I mean, I mentioned it going in, this isn't a football school. It had an opportunity to beat a blue blood to start things off, and it just didn't quite get there. I don't know what that means for the rest of its season, but it's just a tough loss to take when you had the kind of aspirations Purdue did and still does to start off this year.
You just can't fall into the Nebraska trap of what they did last year. Lose every game by single digits, or just lose the way you did, have a late lead, cough it up. Because once you do that, 2 times start the season, okay, then you see it become 3 times. Next thing you know, it's just contagious. But I think that they're pretty headstrong, though. Look, Aiden O'Connell is 37 years old. He's very experienced. He's a good captain and leader to have on this team. I think Jeff Brown's going to have everyone's head screwed on tightly enough where, I don't think that they are going to let this get contagious. But, yeah, that's like the only additional worry that you have if you're a Purdue fan. It's like, oh, we were just right there, and oh, no, maybe that keeps happening throughout the year. But, hey, that's why we stay tuned to 11 more weeks of football, Nate.
Just a bad way to lose an opening football game if you're Purdue and the Boilermakers. Hopefully they can bounce back and, of course, make something good out of this, because I still do believe Purdue has a good football team in there, but we'll end up seeing how this affects things in the next few weeks and the start of the season for both teams. Because I mentioned it before, again, I think that this game, especially, maybe not in the first couple of weeks when they're playing a bunch of pushovers, but when you get into the thick of things, I think is a big indicator, at least, as to where which team is at to start off the season. Matt, while we got you here, let's go over a little bit of things from the weekend for Big Ten football, starting with your Michigan State Spartans starting the season, of course, over against Western Michigan. What do you think
more excited.
Yeah, what do you think Spartans are going to do here this weekend?
Look, the spread's at 22 right now. The last I checked on betonline.net. That sounds pretty good. I mean, look, Western Michigan has a pretty good defense for the MAC, arguably the best defense in the MAC. But still, at the end of the day, that is a group of 5 unit. And then on the other side of the ball for their offense, they lost 4 of their top 5 pass catchers. All right, they're replacing their quarterback. They're replacing both their offensive tackles. This is a prime spot for our defense to feast. And if you followed Michigan State last year, just from the outside looking in, you might laugh at that, being like, oh, their best defense sucked. You're going to get carved by a new quarterback that's a redshirt freshman from Kalamazoo. Well, if that happens, then, yeah, we're feeling horrible about the rest of the season, because this is a very passable test for our secondary. Like I said, new receiving core for Western, new quarterback, new tackles. If MSU doesn't win by, a comfortable margin, then start to get a little nervous. But also, if they let this guy go off for like even 250 yards, a pair of touchdowns, I start to tug the shirt collar a little bit, like, oh my God, maybe things aren't solved in one off season. But I'm never more excited, never more scared. But look, this should, let me knock on wood here. This should be a relaxing win when it gets like the third or fourth quarter. Should be a relaxing win. Should be. Should.
Well, you mentioned it. Michigan State's minus 22, according to our friends at Bet Online. Minus 21, actually. It started the week at 22, but 21 right now, at least, is what I have it most recently on my sheet. 21 is an interesting number. I mean, it's, as you mentioned, major against mid-major, but it's not like the, let's say, 36-point spread we saw for the game last night, tonight, when we're talking here on the show. But it was 21 points. What do you have? My record after the 2 losses yesterday from Penn State and Minnesota that I took, is at 1-4 on the year. You were 0-2 after 2 losses last week.
I was not good. Yeah, I know that much. It's what are you gonna do though? Do you know what I do like this game though? Actually, and you know me, Nate. I love my totals. I think the over/under last I checked was at 54. I want to say for Michigan State, Western Michigan. I like the under this game for everything I just talked about with Western. You know, I don't have a doubt MSU can do their job and get close to 40 points, but maybe it doesn't happen because Western has a good defense. I just look, I know I'm jinxing myself into oblivion and now Michigan State's going to lose like by 50 points, but like, I can't see a world where Western Michigan's offense rips off like over 25 points. You know, like I think that they will be kept under like 2 touchdowns, under 17 points. So I think that under 54 is going to be the play here. So that's what I feel strongest with about this game as we move forward into the betting weekend.
I'm going with Michigan State minus the 21. I already had, of course, Penn State, Purdue. I had Purdue plus 3.5 and New Mexico State plus 36. Neither of those teams could get it done. Moving on, maybe the most intriguing matchup of the weekend from a conference standpoint is the only other conference game we've got. It's Indiana against Illinois. Neither of these teams are any good, but Indiana's a 1.5 favorite, which actually makes this a very interesting game to talk about from that standpoint.
Right. I'm flummoxed that they are actually the favorites in this game. Yeah, I get that Illinois won last week, and you know, it's you're just falling in love with Illinois because they beat a bad Wyoming team. Like,
the bettors agree with you. Indiana started as 3 points of the week.
See, there we go. Because what I see in Illinois is I see an incredible running back who I think is squarely in the upper third of the Big Ten as far as running backs go. And their offensive line, too. These are some big boys right here. They're all over 300 pounds. Most, if not all of them, are on the 320-pound mark. They will just lean on teams over and over again. I like what I saw from DeVito, the quarterback. No, I don't think he's going to be, a Heisman campaign guy or even in maybe the upper third of Big Ten, but he was solid enough. And he came from a place in Syracuse where he was getting sacked almost 2 times per play. It was unbelievable how little pocket protection that he got. So now he actually is at a place where he can throw the ball without having PTSD every single drop back. So that seemed to do well for him against Wyoming. I get it. I get it. Indiana is different than Wyoming. But I still don't have a lot of faith in Indiana this year. I'm still not there with the Hoosiers. And that pains me to say because I like Tom Allen. I think he's a really fun coach. What a fun program to root for. That little COVID year run that they had was a lot of fun. But boy, I just don't see it with that man. And I just don't get it with Illinois being underdogs, especially with how well teams can do from week 0 to week 1. You have that one game under your belt. You got the game experience. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but sometimes – it does make the difference. I think it'll make the difference here with Illinois. So that's a long way of me saying I'm responsibly hammering Illinois plus 1.5 here on the road.
I've got the same thing for the same reason. Illinois just looked good last weekend, and that's more than what you can say from anything else that you got out of this matchup.
Good point.
Next game is Rutgers plus 7 on the road against Boston College.
Sure. You know what? I'm actually gonna be responsible now. I'm not just gonna joke about that. This is a game I pass on because I have no idea what the heck is gonna happen. I don't know the quarterback situation going on with Rutgers. I just never know what's going on with Boston College at any given moment. So I just have to stay away from this game. If I'm gonna do it, it's maybe after I have a few too many fireballs. Yes, I'm wearing my WTF. Where's the Fireball shirt in preparation for tailgating today? Maybe I want to get a little bit of action on Rutgers and Boston College. I'll just do a unit on the over, just blindly. Well, why not? That's always fun. But no, I can't in good conscience say that I will be betting this game because it'd be irresponsible, I think.
I'll take the Boston College side. I agree. There's a lot to figure out with Rutgers, and I don't know, to be fair, all that much more about Boston College, if any, but I just know that I think Rutgers could be a little bit of a mess. And if they're 7-point underdogs, I can see them losing it by that much. Sure. Last game I wanted to make sure that we talk about, of course, Ohio State, Notre Dame. It's at 17 points, start of the week at 17.5. But we talked to Jay Stevens and asked the same questions earlier this week. Can you be 17 points better than a top 5 team?
Right. I know, and I'm so scarred from what happened last year in their game against Oregon. I know a lot has changed, like the whole defensive scheme and the coaching staff has changed with the defense, and that the Buckeyes probably won't get any worse than they were in that game last year against Oregon. But still, like I just have flashbacks to them getting stunned. Not just not even covering the spread, but stunned outright, obviously, to an Oregon team. So, man, 17.5 is a metric butt ton of points to be giving to a top 5 team, just like you said. So am I going to be a coward and stay away from that? Absolutely, I will be a coward and stay away from that. Instead, I'm going to be going the over because, the question marks with Ohio State's defense will probably be solved early on. I still have them, so maybe Notre Dame can put up some points, but also it's just kind of how a few games ago I said I don't trust Western's offense to carry the total to the over. I absolutely trust Ohio State's end of their bargain to help push that over. So I'm going to be taking the over here in Ohio State Notre Dame because that A, that's fun, and B, I just think it's a smart bet to make. So there we have it. Let's try it. Let's give it a try.
It's sound logic. I'm going to go Ohio State with the points, minus 17.5, not with the points, I guess against the points, but sure. I think their team's that good. But we'll end up finding out for sure here on Saturday. Matt Sheehan, best of luck to your Spartans. If you want to know everything that's going on with Michigan State this weekend and every weekend after that, you can tune in after the weekend's done to Locked On Spartans Monday through Friday, where Matt Sarr is there to entertain you and make sure you're up to date.
You know it, Nate. Thanks a lot for the shout out, man. Always fun. Look at us just doing some 12:40 a.m. Locked On Big Ten. Just tell me the passion isn't here. Tell me it's not here.
Luckily, we got a game that will keep us awake.
Amen to that. Yeah, no doubt about that. We could have done 20 minutes on New Mexico State versus Minnesota. We easily could have done that. Come on now.
I was ready to. We'll be doing Illinois, Indiana with Jacob Rude here on the show as well, too. So we got plenty to look forward to.
Fire it up.
All right.
There we go.
Thank you, Matt, as always, for talking with us. We'll talk to you soon.
You're the man.